Right, hello and welcome to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo. You know the drill. We're on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Later on in this episode, Alan Cawley and David McMillan will talk about a double round of League of Ireland men's action and the first round draw for the Champions League and Conference League for Shelbourne and St Patrick's Athletic. Also, I spoke to Shelbourne's Rachel Graham on Monday. She was in action against Sligo Rovers on Saturday as the Women's Premier Division title race continues at pace. And she looks ahead to the Republic of Ireland's two friendlies in the USA at the end of this week. But right now, and first off, we've got to talk about the news that broke on Sunday afternoon. Damien Duff resigned as manager of Shelbourne, confirming to RT Sport that he had stepped down. He's had 3.5 seasons in charge, taking them from 7th in their first season back in the top flight, then 4th, and then unexpectedly bringing them to a first title in 18 years in 2024. However, this season has been far more of a bumpy ride, which is the backdrop to his decision. Now, Shels' statement, they said Damien informed the club this morning that after much thought, he has made the decision to resign. He shared the news with the players earlier today. While all at Shelbourne are deeply saddened by Damien's decision, we fully respect that he feels this is the right choice for him at this time. And obviously the rest of the statement was very magnanimous and grateful towards Duff and his time in charge. Now, Alan Cawley and David McMillan are with me for this week. And I suppose, Alan, let's start on that big news with Damien Duff leaving Shelbourne. The signs probably had been there over the last few weeks in terms of his frustration with the players. But at the same time, the fact that he chose to leave at this stage when the Champions League first qualifying round is only a fortnight away, that's the bit that's actually a massive surprise.
Yeah, it probably was, to be fair, Raf. You know, people straight away appointed a Champions League game only being a couple of weeks out, and people wondering as to why it was the reason for him to walk now. But to be honest with you, based on what I had seen over the past number of weeks, I wasn't all that surprised when I heard the news either, because there's been a bit of a pattern of different little things going on in terms of the fallout with Stephen Bradley. Two fallouts, if you like, if you go back to the non-handshake in Tala a few weeks ago. Then there was the issue a couple of weeks back, and I was at the game when they lost to Shamrock Rovers, and there was the whole over-celebration thing that he took umbrage with. Then there was the incident in Dalymount where he was obviously up on the bank and caused a lot of headlines in that regard. There was the stuff on the pitch with Stephen Kenny last week. And I just felt all this was kind of needless stuff that he didn't really need to be getting himself involved in. And all the more so when you were losing. Like, this stuff, you kind of get a pass on when you're winning. And there was a lot of that last year as well, when obviously everybody was saying he was a breath of fresh air and it was great, which he was. He was absolutely brilliant, as we all know. But the key thing was that they were winning and they were at the top of the league, Raf. But I often find when you're kind of getting yourself embroiled in these little spats and losing, the message doesn't really kind of hit home as much as it would when you're winning. And there was a lot of stuff which I would in like the ones I've pointed out there, I would actually take the side of Stephen Bradley in a couple of those ones. Like the handshake thing, I think you should shake hands after the match regardless of what goes on. And then there was the stuff with the over-celebrating. Like, that goes on. David will tell you, like, stuff in a dressing room where you play a song or a bit of crack or whatever, and you might poke a bit of fun at your opponent. But the key thing is, once you get the victory, you don't do it when you lose. So there was a couple of these things which I felt there was no need for him really to be getting involved in, and he had bigger issues in terms of the team not playing well that he probably should have been focusing on. And then when, I suppose, the final straw was the game when they lost to Derry the other night, and once he come out and criticised the players as heavily as he did, because one thing throughout his tenure, I always found, is that he was a real players manager, and he was always defending the players. He'd always look out for the players. He spoke glowingly about the love he had for the players, the group, and obviously none more so than last year when they got over the line and won the league. And as much as he said he was driving the thing, which he was, as we all know, because of his energy and his enthusiasm, and obviously his coaching skills, the players are still the ones out on the pitch performing and getting you points as well. So it's a two-way street. And once he went so heavy on them Friday night, I just felt this isn't going to end well at all. And for me, it's sad to see, Raf, because I'm a huge fan of Damien Duff. I was when I was young, and he was a player, an iconic figure in the game. And I felt when he was involved in our league, like it was only a plus point. It can only be a positive to have someone of his stature and his pedigree in our league. And then drawing the attention on the league that he does. And even he was so vocal, whether it was positive or negative, but he was drawing attention on the league. And for it to end in the way it has, I just think it's my overriding emotion is that it's kind of sad that it has ended like this, because, as I say, he brought so much to it. I felt the good far outweighed the bad, but I just feel in recent weeks the stuff he was getting himself involved in, there was no real need. And I say it's just sad that it's come to this.
Yeah, the comments you're referencing after the Derry defeat. So he said, I prepared for the game today like I was a professional footballer. My wife probably cursed me at times. 3 hour siesta, ate really well, focused my mind. I would like to really, really know how many of my players prepared like me or as well as me, which is damning, which again, yeah, it is a quite damning statement. But David, last year, I think the episode after they won the league up in Derry, you were on with us at the time, and I think like you were very, you were full of praise for what he's brought to the club and everything else. And just the final part of that quote, you said he's a kind of odd enough character that you don't know what he's going to come out with next. So he's just been a breath of fresh air for the league, and the way he's actually left it is kind of in keeping with the entire tenure that's been there, kind of as Alan has kind of outlined there. But his place in the league was kind of unique, which was the thing as well, because the idea was, I suppose, as former Republic of Ireland player of the stature that he was, former Premier League winner, the fact that he chose Shelbourne to start his management career was unique in and of itself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of been trying to get my head around it over the last couple of days, and there's a couple of elements to it. Obviously, Alan's gone through probably the departure and the immediate reaction to the departure, and I think the first thing to note is, yeah, the persona that he had, the character that he was, and what he brought to the league was massive. I know fans of clubs outside of Shelbourne, might debate that and feel that isn't the case, but I think if you're speaking to journalists, they will tell you he was driving numbers. People were reading articles about him. People were reading more about the league. People are following the league more. So for all of that, it's a huge blow, I think, to the league in general that that character is gone. Hopefully, he's still involved in the league in some form, whether it's management or coaching underage again, or even working on TV or punditry. Because the league has definitely benefited from him as a just his character, what he brought to it. But the thing not to forget then as well is him as a manager. What he's done with Shelbourne. Obviously, they were up and down in 2019, 20, 21 with Ian Morris. Relegated twice, promoted twice and relegated. Sort of in that yo-yo position. I think we're finding with quite a few clubs that it's difficult to come up now and stay up because the standard in the Premier has raised so much. And Shels obviously made a brave decision to put him in charge, even though Ian Morris had got them promoted again. And, he stabilised the club a good first season. I think everyone would have thought they finished seventh, stayed up, but also had a cup final. And, okay, they were well beaten in that final, but it was a very good first season, you would say, a management for him. And again, he progressed the following year to go and finish fourth, qualify for Europe. Again, I think will be viewed as a very successful second season. And obviously what he achieved last year was massive. I don't think, they were rank outsiders to win the league. He put together a squad, probably reminded me a little bit of our Dundalk squad that people felt Kenny put together was kind of a mismatch of players, the likes of Mark Coyle thriving, who he brought from Finn Harps, Conor Kearns, who kind of had a couple of clubs and looks really solid, like number one now for Shels. Bringing in the likes of Paddy Barrett, Sean Gannon, who'd sort of won league titles before and could be big characters for him. So he's done a magnificent job there. What I find a little bit strange about now the departure is when I look at how Shels, I actually went back and had a look like their first 22 games this year. I think they've 30 points under Duff. Their last 22 at the end of last season, they had 34 points. They haven't dramatically dropped off in terms of their points tally or how they've been, in my opinion, how they've been performing. I think it's just Shamrock Rovers have now stepped up to what they had previously been doing, and they've sort of left everybody a little bit in their wake. So for me, it's not like there's been a monster decline in Shelbourne's form that says this manager should be leaving the club or, he's not getting the max out of players they just started last season so well. Jarvis, Malloy are players that left and their form plateaued a bit. So when you look at it all in all, it's difficult to almost accept that he's left when he has. And when you speak about the fact the Champions League game is in 2 weeks' time, uh, I'm sure the players are left a little bit stunned by his departure. And, listening to Joey O'Brien last night, I thought he spoke really well. Damien questioned whether the players would react to a defeat. I know they only drew last night, but even listened to the Waterford manager, John Coleman, he said they stole a point. So obviously they've reacted very well to what must have been a very difficult few days. So credit to the players. And I hope that, Joey, whoever it is that takes over, it is Joey. I think it will be, I'm sure, in the short term to try and get them through those Champions League games. I hope it doesn't affect them going into those because it's important for the whole league that they do well in those games.
Yeah, and Alan, just touching on something David said there, just about where Shels have come from last season. So last season's title win was sort of ahead of schedule in terms of where you'd expect their development. It was sort of a surprise win, which obviously colours the perception of what 2025 is going to be, which is now a title defence and like greater expectations. In a way, obviously the title, the title win is brilliant, but is it kind of a little bit of a curse in another way as well because it just changed the level of expectation and the perception that was there?
Yeah, possibly, Raf, because it was a bit of a surprise. Nobody would have predicted him at the start of the season last year to obviously win the league. So, of course, it was a surprise. But I feel the character that Damien Duff is and the professionalism that he speaks about and the standards that he was setting, he would have wanted them to be in the position this year that that's the expectation because that's what I suppose drives him. He was never really in it to be finishing fifth or sixth, especially in a 10-team league. So even though it might have come as a surprise and a bit premature last year than winning the league, he was only in it to win the league. He would tell you, and that's I'm sure what it was would have been the case in the dressing room. So even though sometimes you can be a victim of your own success, I don't think that was the case with them. I think he went into the start of the season. They obviously strengthened the squad with the full belief that we're going to hold on to our title here, and that's what we have to do, and that's the goal, and that's the aim. And I think even if you look at the players that they brought in, that's what he was thinking in terms of strengthening the squad and bringing in Meepo up front, Ellis Chapman, who had a really good season at Sligo Rovers. That's what he was looking to do, strengthen the squad. You might question some of them, their recruitment now, I suppose, because none of them have really hit the ground running and done all that well in terms of what was there last year. And that can be questioned, fair enough. But certainly in terms of the intention at the start of the season, you could see that was his intention to build on what they had done last year, try and improve the squad as every team does and bring in two or three better players if you can to improve things. So that would have been the sole goal. He would have been disappointed as well in terms of David spoke about the points, I suppose. And if you think about it last year as well, they fell over the line, Raf. Like the form towards the end of the season was pretty kind of hanging on to dear life, really. And it was probably, they were lucky, really, that there was no really kind of Shamrock Rovers in their pomp, if you like, last year. They came towards the end. St. Pat's came with a wet sail towards the end as well. But Shelbourne just had enough, they had enough built up from the start of the season to just maintain it that they could fall over the line. So I'm sure he was disappointed then when you look at the start. He would have been fully aware of that they limped over the line. But the important thing was they got over the line. But he would have been disappointed then when you look at the start of the season, I'm sure, that they haven't really kicked on. As David said, it's very the form towards last season is similar to what they've done so far this season. So there's been no real increase in the form, if you like. And now you have Shamrock Rovers back in their pomp and winning all before them, what you would expect. So that's, I suppose, why they find themselves in the position that they're in as well. And that will disappoint them. And then the formation change. I know there was a couple of injuries, like David spoke there about obviously Paddy Barrett. And Paddy, I had Paddy down as their player of the year last year, which is rare enough sometimes for a centre half in a league winning team. The forwards might get the praise or the lad scoring the goals. But I thought Paddy was outstanding last year. He really was. And of course, Malloy in the early part of the season before he left as well. And I thought the formation change hasn't really suited them. And I've been in Talca a lot. And what they were built on last year was the fact that they were tough to beat. And sometimes people were critical of their style of play. I wasn't all that critical of that. I had no problem with that, to be honest with you, Raf, because they were well set up and they were well drilled defensively. And that's part of a league winning team as well, that their foundations are good and then you obviously build from there. And that's what probably got them over the line as well, was their defensive structure. Whereas this year he was kind of going for a little bit more possession based, and there was a lot of that. Like you look at the stats, I think they're one of the highest in terms of possession as well, but it's that clinical, ruthless kind of edge that they've been missing. And they've gone away from that then defensively, because if you look at the amount of goals they conceded, 25 as well, which I think were probably the best in the league last year. So that's where you obviously try and become a possession-based team, but something then falls down in terms of your defensive structure. And then the change of formation, as I said, I don't think it suited the players at all. And there was a lot of kind of, Mark Hoyle has played in that kind of back three at times when Paddy was injured. And it's just been a bit of a mismatch in that regard. Whereas I always felt last year, the back four, there was continuity every week and they all knew their roles. And that was so beneficial to them throughout the whole season. So there's been a couple of factors in that regard. And then I suppose he speaks a lot about driving it. I think he has to take a bit of responsibility for that in terms of the formation change and what they've done this year and gone away from what they were good at last year. Now, only he can tell you the reasons as to why, but I would have loved to have seen maybe them going back to a back four. Now that Paddy's back in the team and Sean Gannon and go back to that what they were good at last year. But I suppose we'll never find out now, Raf.
Yeah, and the other aspect as well, David, which is obviously a mentor of a sort, being Jose Mourinho, and Jose Mourinho is very well known for creating these mentalities and has quite a bit of success, usually in a 3 year span. And Damien Duff was here for 3.5 years at Shelbourne. It must have been it must be something, you've been in squads where you've defended a title before. But it must be difficult where there's this kind of siege mentality the whole time, to sort of kind of go again without actually getting ground down, whether it's physically or mentally.
Yeah, I think that's what makes such a good manager is you can pick little pieces and use them as motivation. I mean, if we had won a league title, the first thing on pre-season the next year would be, here's still the journalist predictions, and they're all saying Shamrock Rovers are going to win it. Go and prove them wrong, and that would be the first thing you'd nearly be speaking about. Anyone who's doubting you just after you've won a league title. So I'm sure Damien used all of those types of things to motivate his players, and I think the big just question for me with the departure, and hopefully we'll hear from Duff in time, but he made those comments after the Derry game in terms of him driving it, and I'd love to know, did he was his main reason for leaving, is it because he truly believes what he said in terms of he doesn't think there was a leadership in the group and he didn't know how they were going to respond, and did he feel that then he'd taken them as far as he could, or was he questioning the players, or is he blaming himself? Is he kind of saying this group isn't what I've made them to be, or is that my fault that this has happened? So I'd love to hear him speak about it and see what his kind of real mindset was making that final decision, to know why he's left at this moment in time. Because every player who's brought in, like, there was an article about Sean Gannon. He said he arrived here in East Wall, and his Jeep pulled up beside him, wanted to chat to him. He's met other players at the airport, and players said, look, that's rare. Normally it's a club rep would pick me up. No, Damien Duff's there at the airport ready to pick you up. So he's obviously brought a lot of players in, put an arm around their shoulder. So it seems a little bit bizarre that you now kind of walk away from that group that you've mentored so much, and you've built up, and to have such big fixtures coming up in the Champions League, something you've earned through winning the league so hard last year. To do that, you've earned that opportunity now to go and manage in the Champions League. I looked at Kevin Doherty's interview the other day. This devastation still was palpable from the after the game in Cork, that he's not going to be able to manage in Europe. When you see that, and I know we're talking about two different characters. Damien's obviously done so much in the game. He's played in the Champions League. He's won Premier Leagues, but still, you would think there's a driving force there to go and manage in the Champions League. So I would love to just pick his brain and find out, and hopefully we will find out exactly what his reasoning was behind it.
Yeah, and in the longer term, Alan, in terms of what's next, because Damien Duff, like everyone is replaceable, but him as a unique character, that is irreplaceable, and certainly you can't replace it directly. So, what way do you expect them to go, or what way would you be looking to go in terms of who follows on and who fills that sort of void, both from a footballing point of view, but even from sort of the marketing point of view, because he was sort of a lightning rod, maybe for good, and also from the critics as well, at the club as well.
Yeah, it's going to be like such a void he has left, in terms of the owners as well, because I think they were caught off guard totally by it also, by all accounts, what we're reading. And there was a bit of a scramble up to the AUL from the owners, and different people trying to talk him round. Joey O'Brien, Luke Byrne, a few of them were involved trying to talk him round. But I think once he had his decision made, that was it. And it leaves such a hole for them, because, as you say, you're speaking about not only the football end of things, but also the promotional and the marketing side of things. And not just Shelbourne. I think the league was based in a lot of their marketing and promotion on Damien Duff as well, and him being a key figure in their league. And it's so difficult, as you know, Raf, in terms of the coverage that we've always had to fight for in our league. And David will tell you, and even throughout Dundalk's amazing success that David was involved in, you're still having to compete with the GA at the moment, which is obviously having a bit of a revival under the new rules. The hurling obviously went during the summer, the rugby when they're going really well. So this was a fella that was getting front and centre all the time on the back pages of the papers or online or wherever. And now that's gone. So like that's going to be a huge void to fill, just in terms of the promotional side of things and marketing. Now that's not to say the league won't survive. It'll always survive, as you said. He's not that he's replaceable, but just the league will survive no matter what. But just in terms of, I suppose, who to bring in from the football end of things, I think that's why even listening to Joey O'Brien's interview last night, it could be a thing that he takes it, or that's what they might want till the end of the season, because there's continuity. Because Joey seems like, I don't know Joey, but he seems like a similar enough kind of figure in terms of his drive and his motivation as well. He was obviously a brilliant player, as we know, and had big success. So it could be something that he might be the ideal candidate if he wants to step into the breach. I don't know now. You'll have to, obviously, have to come from him. But just in terms of even till the end of the season, till they regroup. But they won't be short on candidates or people interested, because it's a huge job, huge opportunity. The club is on an upward curve in terms of being back in the limelight, being back in the Champions League. And because maybe Damien has done that, as we said, prematurely, you don't want them to fall back again, back to kind of not to where they were in terms of relegation or anything like that, back to Division 1. I can't see that happening. But just in terms of being back to a mid-table kind of club again, you'd want them up there competing with the likes of Shamrock Rovers and Pats and Bohemians, because it's a huge club, as we know. So that kind of rise that they've had under Damien, they certainly won't want that to falter anytime soon. They'll want to maintain that. But again, that'll be up to, I suppose, the powers that be in terms of who to go for. But they won't be short on people interested in the job. I think even from across the water as well, Raf, there'll be huge interest. Because again, as we go back to what Damien has brought in terms of the interest, not just here domestically, but all over the UK as well. People are aware of the club and what he has done. And especially because the league is on a bit of an upward curve as well. So people will be interested in trying to get themselves involved in that. But just go back to what Dave was saying there about the players. That's what surprised me so much in all this. I mentioned about the different incidents, maybe with the different managers, and that can happen, and he was creating that siege mentality or whatever. But what surprised me most was him going so heavy on the players, Raf. He always spoke about how together and the unity and the spirit, and that's what we're built on, and that's what most good teams are built on. But they seem to have a real kind of bond amongst all those lads. And you only have to look at the celebrations, even after they won the league and all. The following day when they were in Talca Park, and I think he was out celebrating with them as well, and he was loving it. Like he was really kind of immersed in that kind of circle with the players as well, which sometimes you can have managers who can kind of be together, but they leave the players off to have their moment and all. But he was fully immersed in what the players were doing as well. So for him to go so heavy and basically slate them in the manner that he did, I found that a bit much, because you can't have it like what they were built on was, as I said, all that togetherness and spirit, and the players played their part in that. And to flip it in such a short space of time, yeah, it surprised me. It really did, that he went so heavy on them on Friday night.
Yeah,
Raf, just to say, I think my point I was trying to make was that, will Damien feel he overspoke Alan, like you said, that he's almost let the players down himself? Did he go too hard, and he's like sat back that evening, looked at that and thought, I should never have said that? Or is it, no, he believes every word of it, and the players haven't followed my lead, and they're not, as he said, they've not become leaders like I think they should. And so that's what I'd love to get an answer to, I suppose.
Yeah, we might hear from him in the fullness of time. But a bit of news actually just on the Champions League front. So RT Sport today confirmed that Shelbourne's UEFA Champions League first qualifying round, first leg against NIFL Premiership champions Linfield, will be live on RT2 and RT Player. The first leg takes place at Talca Park on Wednesday, the 9th of July, with a 7:45 p.m. kickoff. We're not showing the second leg, but first leg is live on RT, and second leg will be in Windsor Park on July the 16th, and then the winner then faces Karabag of Azerbaijan. And into that, and David, the I suppose the intricacies of being involved in qualifying campaigns in Europe. You spoke about the reaction, and we'll talk about the Waterford game in more detail later on, but the way they reacted last night seemed to be pretty good from the Shels players. It'll be kind of interesting now to see the dynamic between them and Linfield coming up, because Linfield would have been preparing to take on a Damien Duff side, and all of that has been flipped completely. So it's a very different picture now.
Yeah, it does probably adds a little bit of confusion for Linfield. And that's why I think from Shell's perspective, continuity for the next couple of weeks, as Alan said, maybe till the end of the season, but at least for the next month or two, probably if I was a decision maker in Shelbourne, I think that's the most obvious thing to do, is try and ensure that Joey stays there and takes, if he's not committed to doing it long term, at least have him there for the next month in charge to see through these games. Because I think if you're bringing in a new manager with such a short space of time to what are such crucial games, that's really hard to try and, new tactics and, whatever, everything that a new manager brings, really hard to hit the ground running into those games. So yeah, continuity for Shelbourne will be, I think, really important. And look, football's all about timing. I think it's right that Joey will stay there. Even doing his interview, he's kind of seems to be a figure who's avoided interviews a lot in the last couple of years. He's let Damien kind of be front and center in terms of all of that. He's very few interviews, but so it was interesting to hear him yesterday, and he was full of, as I said, it was full of praise for the lads, even though it was a 2-2 draw, but they obviously reacted well and played very well. So even if you were, again, if you're a decision maker in Shell, seeing that performance and seeing how he spoke about the players, I think you feel confident running with them into the games. From Linfield's perspective, I suppose, yeah, they'd have been setting up for this. They're obviously not in season, so they're setting up for this particular game. They'd have been watching videos, watching how Shells are playing. And if Joey stays there, that probably won't change dramatically, but it certainly makes you think and puts doubt in your mind coming into those games. So hopefully that works in Shell's favour. It's a huge game. I think it's a really intriguing tie to be looking forward to see. It's always interesting to see the levels across the two leagues. Linfield, were quite comfortable, I think, in their league campaign last year to come out on top. And obviously, I think Larne had won it the year previous, so they were obviously keen to get back into the Champions League. But they've had some excellent results in Europe as well. So there's, Shells won't be underestimating the challenge that Linfield will bring.
Yeah, and your sense, Alan, as someone who's played in both leagues in the past, of the gap that does or doesn't exist between sort of the teams at the very top end?
Yeah, there's a gap, definitely, Raf. And even though I suppose my experience was a good few years ago, you only have to look at Shamrock Rovers and Larne last year as well to see that the gap is still there in my view. But that's not to say that I think Shelbourne are way out in front of Linfield. I think it'll be a tight game. I really do, because as David said, they had some very good results themselves in Europe, and they're obviously back with a lot of momentum behind them as well. The fact that they won the league so convincingly. So I think it'll be a tough game. And again, you only have to look at Shelbourne's domestic form at this moment in time. Hence why obviously Damien has gone, but they'll fancy their chances. I think it's a 50-50 game. But also in that's what surprises me so much as well, that the timing of him leaving, Raf, is the fact that if you think of Shamrock Rovers last year, obviously the league campaign wasn't going as well, but the European run was unbelievable. And David will tell you get motivated by the European games, like you really do, to turn you on. And that's something that I felt maybe Damien could have been looking at it, thinking this could turn our season around, because we all know the route as well, in terms of you win that game against Linfield, you still have your 2 or 3, I suppose, backdoor options that we call them now, or whatever, dropping down, and that's the route, the Champions route. So it could have been a really long, prolonged European run for them, which would have been really amazing. And to think of how hard Damien has worked to get them into that position, and now here it is, only a couple of weeks away to walk away from that. Like, it just kind of gives you an indication of maybe how things bad were. And we're not privy to what was going on in the dressing room. Now, I certainly haven't heard in terms of that there's been any kind of a civil war or fallouts or anything like that. It seems to be based on purely the run of form. But you would think, because of, again, we spoke about the togetherness that they've had over the, I suppose, Damien's tenure, that they could have turned things around. Like, it didn't seem like all was broken. Yes, they're on a bad enough run of form, but that can happen with any team. But it's certainly fixable. It didn't look to me as though all was broken, and that any of the stuff that we're seeing on the outside was irreparable. I certainly didn't think that. I always felt that something like that could kickstart your season. You beat Linfield, all of a sudden you're up and running. You go into the game against Carabag, you could get a good result in that. But you still have, I suppose, as I said, the safety options to drop down. And they could have had a really prolonged summer in terms of Europe, which would have certainly helped domestically as well. So that is strange, the timing of it. But I fancy them against Linfield, but like David said, I think it's important that Joey sticks around and there is continuity going into that game, because I wouldn't be looking at Linfield the way I was looking at Shamrock Rovers against Larne last year, if that makes sense. I felt there was a big divide between Shamrock Rovers and Larne. I don't think the divide is as big between Shelbourne and Linfield.
Yeah, and in the Conference League as well, as we know with the news from Drogheda United last week, their dreams of playing in Europe were dashed after the appeal to CAS, and Shamrock Rovers don't enter the competition until the second round as well. So the first round in the Conference League features only St. Pat's, who are up against a Lithuanian outfit called Hegelman, who have limited European experience from a couple of seasons ago when they lost 5-0 to Macedonia Shkupi, which is a club, of course, that the League of Ireland sides have come across before. So that was over 2 legs, and Pat's should be favourites, David, but as we'll discuss later on, obviously their domestic form is poor, but they've been a club that have actually tended in the last few seasons to be galvanised by European runs midway through the campaign.
Yeah, Alan spoke about, how that could have helped, Duff and Shels to galvanise them. It certainly did for St. Pat's last year. It was probably the start of their really good run was their European performances and how they upped their levels there, and they just brought that into their league form. And as we know, I think it was a 9 wins on the bounce towards the end of the season. So they'll need something similar this season. Their league form is 3 defeats on the trot. It's a far cry from what they were doing towards the end of last year, and it's difficult to really put your finger on that because I think when I looked at the signings initially that they'd made over the winter break, you thought, they've strengthened the squad here from a team that's finished the season so well. So, yeah, they'll really need to try and use these games and the games leading up to them as motivation to get your form and shape a little bit before you go into these games because despite the fact they might be favourites, we've seen over the years the surprises. The disappointing result for Derry, for example, last year to the Gibraltar team. Those results can happen if you're not on your game. You can easily flounder and lose in Europe. So for Pats, it'll be important to try and start to pick up their form leading into those games. And yeah, I think Alan's right what he said in terms of both Shels, like Shamrock Rovers did it last year, their league form. I would have been quite critical of how they performed in the league last season, but they were able to sort of produce huge performances in Europe to have, a hugely successful campaign that obviously continued into early this year. So there is something about Europe, it excites players. It's, the biggest part of a player's career is appearing in Europe. So no matter how good or bad the league form is, it'll always give you an extra lift. And, Pats, when we speak about Pats, they'll need to use that to their advantage and try and make the most of that.
Yeah, and if they do get past Hegelman, they'll get the winner of Nomakalu of Estonia or Albania's Partizani in the second round, while Shamrock Rovers, obviously, as I said, are already there. So they're awaiting the winner of Joseph's of Gibraltar or Cliftonville of the NIFL Premiership as well. So the draw was also made this morning for the Women's Champions League, and Athlone will face Cardiff City in the first qualifying round on the 30th of July for the chance to face ZNK Agram in the group final on the 3rd of August. And we're going to talk about Friday and Monday's games in the Premier Division very shortly. But first, on Monday afternoon, I caught up with Shelbourne midfielder and former Ireland international Rachel Graham for a weekly chat, and there's plenty going on internationally and domestically. All right, delighted to be joined by Rachel Graham. Rachel, what's the crack? How are you?
I'm very good, Raf. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad now. We'll talk about the domestic action later. Obviously, you were involved in it with Shelbourne. But first off, last week we reviewed the squad named by Carla Ward for these two games in Colorado and Cincinnati, Republic of Ireland versus USA. And as it happens, both games are live on RTE. So the first one will be on Friday from 2 a.m. on the RTE player, followed by a live blog on rte.ie/sport and the RTE News app. So in the US, it's happening on Thursday, but obviously a huge time difference between Colorado and here. So it'll be Friday, early hours on Friday, 2 a.m. And then the second game, Sunday, 7:30 on RT2 and RT Player. Kickoff is at 8 o'clock. So it's a very quick turnaround between that game in Colorado and then Cincinnati, Ohio. And I suppose with that in mind, Rachel, that means probably there's going to be a fair deal of experimentation and changes to the lineups.
Yeah, you'd imagine so. I mean, playing the US, they're number one in the world. It's going to be a very taxing game on our girls. And like you said, it's a really quick turnaround. And look, these are obviously two friendlies. And I'd imagine Carla Ward kind of is going into them thinking, I want to, see players and see what they're like in game day situations. So yeah, look, I think the first one will probably be a more starting 11 that we're used to. And then depending on how the bodies react or how they recover from the games or whether we pick up injuries or whether she wants to see new faces. I think in the second game you might see them new faces and a few more changes.
Yeah, and an area you've spoken about in recent times is right back. And again, looking at the profile of players that are in the squad, there will be a certain level of uncertainty because there isn't that natural player in that position in terms of the squad selected.
Yeah, so it's a spot that we've spoken about previously before, and it's somewhere that we're kind of lacking a natural right full, and we spoke about probably Jamie Finn being the one that's most likely to slot back in there when she's back from injury. She just unfortunately hasn't made these camps, but look, I don't know if maybe Hayley Nolan is the possible one that's going to slot in there. She's been called in, and before that was Aoife Mannion, who is also not in this squad, and Then we have Anna Patton, and look, Jess Stapleton played there at the last game, and she's done really well. But I think the likes of Salvini were, happy to sit in and let us attack. But I think it's going to be a completely different case when we're playing the US. Like, they have no interest in sitting back. They'll be, from the get-go right down our throats, and they're obviously really quick, athletic team. So I just think the likes of Jessie Stapleton probably at right foot is not ideal for this game. So it's going to be someone who probably needs a bit more pace. So maybe it's Hayley Nolan, if not maybe Anna Patton. But yeah, we're still lacking that, natural right back. And ideally we would have had Jamie Finn in for this game. She's just missed out. And look, I think come around the time of the Belgian game, she could be the one who's there. So it's really unfortunate for her and Carla that she hasn't made this squad.
Yeah, and players who have played in that position who are missing, so Heather Payne and Aoife Mannion, and both, as it happens, are leaving Everton and Manchester United respectively at the end of their contracts. And we've spoken recently about Izzy Atkinson, Megan Campbell, who have all been released by their clubs. It just kind of highlights there's a level of instability there, I suppose, at club level for a significant portion of very high-profile players in our squad.
Yeah, look, it's obviously not ideal. That's another two players now without clubs. And look, that's obviously the nature of football. Players get let go, players come and go. So it's nothing strange, but obviously not ideal for us. And I think, Aoife Mannion, it's probably not the most surprising of one. She's only appeared 7 times, and most of them appearances have been on as a late sub. So she hasn't got a whole lot of game time. Heather Payne, probably a bit more surprising. She started 13 games for Everton last year, played a lot more. So that was probably a bit of a surprise, but I think the likes of Heather is someone who probably try to stay, in the top league. Possibly the London Lionesses who have just come up could be a good move for her. So I don't think she'll be shortage of getting offers at clubs. I think Aoife Mannion now is, she's 29. She probably wants to go somewhere where she gets a lot more game time, where she's starting a lot of games, and she would have even played right full for Man United. But I don't think that's the position that she's most comfortable in. I think she's a centre half. So I think for her, it's probably going to be either one of the lower WSL1 teams, or possibly dropping down to, the likes of Birmingham, who've just lost Louise Quinn. So are missing, a centre half there. So there's obviously other Irish girls there as well that she can slot in and be friendly with. So yeah, I think for her, she needs a lot more game time. But I think Heather was probably a bit more of a surprising one.
Yeah, and then in terms of the goalkeeper position, which is kind of interesting, obviously Courtney Brosnan has been so dependable, both in terms of being available and also her performance levels. But Grace Maloney, 7 caps, and then Sophie Whitehouse, uncapped at this stage. Is there scope, or if you were looking at it, do you feel actually one of the two backup goalkeepers need to get an opportunity just in case? Because you never know, I suppose, with football and injuries.
Yeah, and that's like we haven't really seen Courtney Brosnan not in the goal for a lot of the games. It's obviously not an area that you do change week in, week out, or game to game. So, but if Courtney does get injured, we have two keepers there who do have a lack of inexperience probably in the last couple of years. So yeah, possibly you might see it in this game. I think Courtney will start the two games. Maybe we might see one of the keepers get 45 minutes even. But yeah, look, I think if Courtney gets injured, obviously Grace Maloney's not at a club at the moment. So that's obviously not ideal. So yeah, like ideally you will be getting them game time. But again, Carla's probably thinking, I want my best keeper in. I'm playing #1 in the world. I want my best keeper in the goal. So look, that you'll have to play that one by ear. I'm not sure what she'll do, but ideally, yeah, we could get game time for them. But it's how do you want the game to go as well?
Yeah, and then the USA on the other side of it, as you mentioned, they're world #1. They're not going to be a full strength at all in terms of the squad that they have picked. But where do you feel they're at? Because the last World Cup, on the evidence of it, it felt like some of the big European nations have either caught up or in some cases overtaken, like the likes of Spain and England. But then they went and won the Olympic football tournament there last year. So where do you feel they're at as world #1, which is their status?
Yeah, and look, they've always kind of been in and around that ranking. I think the lowest they ever went to was 5th in the world. So I think, look, for a long time in women's football, they were so athletic, so fit compared to everyone else, and no one could really keep up with that. And I think in the last few years, the likes of Spain, England, France have kind of got that side into their game, but they're more technical, which is where the USA would have struggled, or they're not really known for being a really technical team. So, look, I think this camp, it's quite an inexperienced squad for Emma Hayes. There's 6 players who are completely uncapped, and including them 6, then there's 19 players with less than 10 caps. So it's a really inexperienced squad. She hasn't selected any players from Europe, just to give them a rest. Basically, they're in their off season. So, that's the likes of their captain Lindsay Heaps, plays for Lyon, Emily Fox for Arsenal, Crystal Dunn for PSG. Like, they're all going to be missing. Trinity Rodman is out injured. So some of the big kind of the names or the faces that we really know are not going to be there. But look, in saying that, they still have some of the other big players. They've Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, Naomi Girma, Alyssa Thompson. Like they're all, experienced, top quality players. So look, it's going to be a really tough game, tough 2 games for our squad. We've played them numerous times in the past. We've lost every single time. The results seem to be getting quite tighter. We played them last time was in April 2023 and we lost 1-0, 2-0. So look, they are getting tighter, but look, I just hope for these 2 games that we do get something of value from the game, and it's not just a case where, we're camped in our 18-yard box and we're just bodies on the line trying to defend, trying to block shots, and we do get a bit more where we can possibly get in the ball or even just get in a better shape higher up the pitch, because I think if you're going off previous games, it does kind of go that way where it's, 11 players behind the ball and it's just stopping a shot or throwing your body on the line. And look, it's obviously going to be a great occasion, great experience for the girls, but I just think for us now, we hope to be getting some sort of value from the game and some sort of thing where we come away and say, look, we done that well, or we improved here going into the games in Belgium.
Yeah, and obviously the Belgian game in October in terms of the playoff, 2 legs. That's the or Nations League playoff 2 legs. That's obviously the bigger, longer term target. But do you feel that there's a bit of a subplot there with Carla Ward knowing Emma Hayes quite well and having even been in that US setup last summer?
Yeah, look, I'm sure that's how it came about. They're obviously friendly with each other. They've worked with each other before, and if Emma Hayes rings it and says, look, opportunity here to play 2 friendly games, it's very hard to say no. But like I said, I just hope we get some sort of value from the game and it's not a case where we're bodies on the line and just doing everything we can to keep the US out, because, we do have, like I said, it's going to be a great occasion, great opportunity, but we need to think about, qualifying for Euros, qualifying for World Cups and getting the best games in that are going to prepare our girls for that. So, like I said, it's going to be a great opportunity, but hopefully we get something from the game as well.
Yeah, and in terms of you mentioned Naomi Girma from Chelsea earlier, so she would have joined them for $1.1 million, I think, which was a world record transfer in the women's game at the time in January. There's a sense maybe she hasn't really kicked on a huge amount at Chelsea, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, well, look, she obviously moved to Chelsea, but she picked up an injury soon after she went. She got a calf injury, so she hasn't played a whole lot. But look, she's been in the last squad for the US. She played the last couple of games, so she's back to fitness, and that's the reason why she is in this camp. And now other EU players are in that. She just has had a lack of game time and wants to be back playing, getting minutes in her belt. But look, she's one of the best players in the world. She was the first ever $1 million player, and that's obviously for a reason. She's probably the most complete like modern day defender, you would say. She's a great defender, number one. She's quick, she's good on the ball, and Emma Hayes even said she thinks she's the best defender in the world at the moment, or the best one she's ever worked with. So like, she's a huge player. She's going to captain the squad, I think, for this camp. So look, it's going to be a tough one for the likes of Kira Caruso, Amber Barrett, or Saoirse and whoever's up against her, because sometimes when you've been out for a long time with injury as well, you kind of you're chomping at the bit to get back. So she's going to be taking these games as serious as can be.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Chelsea as well, the dominant team in recent times in the Women's Super League in England, and they last week confirmed they're expanding to 14 teams for the 2026-27 season onwards, and a promotion relegation playoff introduced as well. And given obviously it's a foreign league from our point of view, but at the same time, it's probably the biggest market that's closest to us in terms of where a lot of our players would go to. What impact do you feel that expansion would have from an Irish player's perspective then?
Like, I think it just obviously gives more opportunity for Irish players to play in the top league, play against the best players every week and challenge themselves a bit more. And if you're going off last year, we had 14 players in the WSL too, and look, 10 of them have been in and out of recent enough squads. So that's a great opportunity for them to challenge themselves a bit more every week, and even out, like, there'll be more games. So, managers might do a bit more game management and use their squad a bit more. And like we said about Aoife Mannion, who, really struggle to get game time. But if you have an extra 4 games every year, you might rotate your squad a bit more. And that's an opportunity for girls to get more playing minutes. So look, it's just the overall opportunity either to get yourself up into that league, or if you're already up there, to get more minutes. So look, probably for the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea are probably not overly keen on the idea, given, they go far in other competitions and an extra 4 league games could be tough. But I think for the likes of Aoife Mannion or Abby Lark and Izzy, it's a great opportunity for them to get more minutes at the top level.
Yeah, and just turning to our own league, so the domestic action, Athlone Town still top of the table, 3-0 winners over Peamount, and then yourselves and Shelbourne 3-1 winners away at Sligo, so right on Athlone's heels, and Wexford 4-1 winners over DLR Waves, Shamrock Rovers edged Cork City 2-1, Bohs lost 2-1 at home to Treaty United, and then Galway United, who you could coincidentally play this coming weekend in the Cup as well, 7-0 winners at Waterford, so they're coming into form just in time. But starting with your game against Sligo, so as you said it last week, you'd played them in the All Ireland Cup not so very long ago, so you were expecting a bit of a tighter game, and that's sort of how it played out, at least on the scoreboard.
Yeah, look, it was definitely a much tougher, tighter game than we had the 2 weeks before. And look, we had made a few changes and they were missing one or two as well. So it wasn't a true reflection of the game in the All Ireland Cup. We knew it was going to be much tougher going down, and that's the way it was. And look, I do think we were probably in control of the game and we never really were under threat of losing the game. But we go 2-0 up, but then at 2-1, it's obviously a bit of a ropey last 10, 15 minutes to get to the half. So that's what we done. And look, backed us to, we weren't going to crumble, we weren't going to derail, just going 2-1 down. So I think once we got the third goal, we were, pretty much in control then. And yeah, look, we're just keeping ourselves in as best form as we can. We've tough games coming up. Obviously, Galway this weekend is going to be really tough. So good for us to get back playing. We obviously hadn't played the week before, so good to get back minutes into the legs of everyone. And yeah, obviously Kate Mooney getting a hat trick, which was brilliant for her. She hasn't scored the last few games, so I was delighted for her to see her on the score sheet, let alone, and then 3 goals is just a cherry on top.
Yeah, the penalty obviously was the first one, but the second goal I think was particularly one. Well, the third one was a kind of poacher's finish, but the second one I thought was really well taken.
Yeah, and that's like I always say that about Kate. That's the brilliant thing about her. It's she doesn't just get one type of goal. She gets good strikers goals, which you see in the first one. It's a good bit of skill to touch inside and just a calm finish. And then the second one's that real poacher's goal where she does tend to get them kind of scrappy, crap goals where it's just on the end of a loose ball. But look, a goal's a goal, and Kate's brilliant at that. Like, I mean, even off the ball, her work rate is excellent. She closes centre halves down, wins the ball back for us so much as well. And I just think now with the league this year, possibly, if it ends on the same amount of points, it'll go head to head or it'll go to goal difference. So, each goal is crucial because we're pretty much neck and neck with that low. I think there's only 4 goals in the difference. So they obviously have the likes of Kelly Braid who's scoring pretty much every week as well. So every goal is important at this stage.
Yeah, and Kate Mooney, 10 goals this season, so she's top of the scorers charts at the moment in the league, and obviously on top of scoring a hatful of goals in the second half of last year as well after arriving back at the club. So for a player like herself, she's 26 at the moment. When you think about sort of like the international radar and that, like in the longer term, what would she need to do to maybe put herself in that kind of conversation?
Yeah, look, I think, there's obviously a big difference between our league and the international league or the international standard because, I mean, if you put Claire Carusa in our league or even Amber Barrett when she was here, they'd be scoring every week or they were scoring every week. So look, just because you're scoring here doesn't mean it automatically transfers into international standards. But look, she's probably doing everything she can at the moment. I would say you just need to be doing it consistently if you want to get the attention of Carla Ward. So look, she's doing her best for us. That's her focus at the moment. She just wants to play for Shels, and that's what's doing well for her at the moment. That's what she's focusing on. She's a good job here. She went abroad and played, came back. So look, it might not be forwards. She's a good little life here. Good job. Great family around her. So look, she's happy here at the moment playing for Shelbourne. Whether she wants to in another year or two, give it another crack at going professional or really trying to get herself in the international squad. But from speaking to her, like it's, Shelbourne is her priority, and that's what she's happy with at the moment.
Yeah, and then Athlone Town, as mentioned, are 3-0 winners against Peamount United. And I think, as you said it last week, that one could have been a potential banana skin, but they dealt with it really well. And then Kelly Brady, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, also was very impactful in this game.
Yeah, look, she's probably been impactful in every game she's played in so far, and she got 2 goals in that one. I think the first one was probably more of an OG, but she still gets the initial header to get it towards goal, and I think the second goal is probably more so what she's about. She gets away from the defenders and then has such a tight angle, but still gets to finish away. But her and Mary Phillips had a great battle throughout the game, and we spoke about Mary Phillips before, who's a really good young defender, and look, she did come out on top in a lot of her 1v1 kind of battles. But ultimately, if you're coming away from the game and the player you're marking has scored 2 goals, you're probably thinking, I probably haven't done my job today. But look, she's so on form at the moment. She's troubling every single defence that she plays against. And like I said, her and Kate or even the likes of Mackenzie they're all kind of battling out for that top goal scorer, but could prove a big difference come the end of the year if it's a goal or one goal or two goals in the difference, and that's what wins you the league. So look, she's really big at the moment. She's doing really well, and she's probably another one who's thinking, Carla surely has to be having an eye on me here, or what more can I do to get a call up at the moment? But look, she's in flying form, and look, I won't say hopefully continues because it's obviously not great for us, but it's great for the league to see, such good players playing it week in, week out.
Yeah, and Bohs seemed to play really well in the first half against Treaty United on the way to losing at Damien Park. But from a Treaty United point of view, it looks like Katie Lawley and Isabella Fachini were the ones kind of carrying the threat for them. And Katie Lawley in particular, and her winner was something else.
Yeah, like I think it was probably the goal of the weekend. Yeah, definitely probably was. And then look, she's a handful all game against Bohs. She was the same against us. She actually didn't start against us, and she came on at half time and made a big difference when she came on. So she's a really kind of direct winger, really powerful, very strong, hard to get the ball off. And even just before a goal, she showed another great bit of skill where she kind of stepped over it in the box and got a yard of space and struck it with her left foot. And she just hits off the crossbar, and that would have probably been an even better goal to get. So, like, that was in the 87th minute. And then I think it was, what's the 93rd minute then? She just, again, a great piece of individual skill, just steps inside, gets the yard, and then, I mean, Rachel Kelly had no chance of saving that ball. But look, she's probably someone that, hasn't played a whole lot for us internationally, like out underage level. So she's probably someone who's, looking to bang down the door of the under 19s international team. I mean, she's doing brilliant in our league. So I think she's definitely has to be on the radar. She hasn't been in the last couple of squads, and they're in now recent. I think coming up towards September, they usually start around their games, September, October. So, you might see her in a squad or two. Like I think her and Maeve Walmer are probably two, really high potential left wingers that we have at the moment. So, yeah, look, obviously you'd like to see her play international level. I think from what she's shown so far in the league, she definitely deserves a call or a chance at that squad.
Yeah, and then from some of the other games, the Lauren Kelly opener for Wexford as well. That was another cracker against DLR Waves.
Yeah, great strike from Lauren. Ball just kind of came to the edge of the box from a corner, just again latches onto a loose ball and just fires a home. Keeper has no chance. And look, Jess Gleeson, in fairness, scored a great header from that game as well. So there was good goals all around the league overall this weekend, which is it's obviously great to see. We want to see tight games, we want to see competitive games, and we want to see good goals. And there was definitely 4 or 5 of them over the weekend.
Yeah, and Galway helped themselves to 7 as well, as mentioned earlier, against Waterford. The first goal didn't come until 30 minutes, but in terms of the context, as you mentioned earlier, in the build up to your own, first round of the cup, which I think, as you said a couple of weeks ago as well, probably wasn't the ideal draw for either side. In terms of one big hitter is going to go out, but like they're just getting back to form just in time for yourselves.
Yeah, which is, obviously a bit of a pain, but and we spoke about Galway before where they hadn't been able to keep a clean sheet, and they've definitely done it in style at the weekend, scoring 7 goals and not conceding any. And look, I think to be fair to Galway, I don't think they've been at full strength pretty much since the start of the league. And Aisling Meany was back playing for them. She got a couple of goals, so she's a real threat for them. Hasn't been around the last few weeks, has been injured. So Digny Farrelly is still injured, so they are playing with not a full deck of cards. So for them, it's the ones that do come in are really young and inexperienced, and it is hard to win week in, week out when you have so many young players. But yeah, look, coming into this weekend, they're obviously looking at the FAI Cup final and thinking that's where we want to be, whether it's not the league, whether we get a good cup run into us now, and they haven't played in the final before, so it's obviously something that they'd love to achieve. So yeah, look, we had a tough game against them. What was it, 4 weeks ago maybe at this stage? So expect definitely no different, especially when it's a one-off game and it's winner takes all kind of thing. It always makes that bit tougher.
Yeah, and I suppose a final question to you as well, just as I suppose a Shelbourne player on the men's side, obviously, as we know now, Damien Duff has resigned as manager, kind of unexpected to an extent, but I know there's kind of this level of solidarity between the men's team, the women's team. I think you've said it multiple times here, sometimes, especially on a bank holiday Monday when the men's team are playing, you will often go with your teammates to go and watch them, and many of the men's players will watch your games as well. So in terms of Damien's impact as a whole, in terms of the club at large, how did you find him?
Look, I think, even for the league, he was brilliant. Whether you love him or hate him, I don't think you can deny that. And, for the club, Shelbourne, he was, he made a massive impact. He drove the standards of like everyone around the club. Even they kind of even filter down to our team, when we see the passion that he speaks with in interviews, and sometimes you see him in training sessions, the passion he has, and it just filters through everyone within the club. And I think that's probably what he needs to be remembered for. He's left the club in a much better place when he came in, and not too long ago, Shelbourne were a first division team and they were kind of up and down, and he took them from that to win the league within 3 years. So, like, I think that's what he needs to be remembered for. It's obviously come very kind of rash and suddenly, and I think that's the way Damien is. He's all in or he's all out, and it's if he felt like he couldn't take the team any further, he's not the right person for the job anymore. So I think, he's given the fans probably the best night of their lives in terms of being a Shelbourne fan. And that night up in Derry and even the scenes in Talca Park that night were something that, will live long in the memories of every Shelbourne fan. And yeah, look, it's obviously sad to see him go, but I just think, for how it's ended, and obviously we've seen everything circulating around social media, and there's a lot of kind of false information going around about how he left. So I just think I'd love to just see him get the send off that he deserves and get the thank from the fans, and I'd love to see him address the fans, address the club, address the players, and that it's left in the right way, because it almost seems like it's come across as he's left on a sour note. So for all the joy and the standards he brought into the league and into the club, it'd be sad to see it go that way.
Yeah, and obviously next week we will preview Women's Euro 2025 ahead of the start of the tournament. Every game is on RTÉ across July, from the group stages all the way to the final. And the only pity, of course, is the Republic of Ireland have missed out on being in Switzerland. Would have been great had they been there, especially the World Cup haven't been in Australia. This was much closer to home for supporters and families of the players as well. But anyway, Rachel, thanks very much for your time and best of luck this weekend in the Cup.
Thanks, Raf. See you soon.
All right, now Alan Cawley and David McMillan are still with me, and we're going to talk about the men's Premier Division. And if we've time, we'll touch on the First Division too at the end. So, first, a reminder of Friday's games. Drogheda United beat Sligo Rovers 1-0. Douglas James Taylor with a very early goal. Galway United were 3-1 winners over St. Pat's. Shamrock Rovers trashed Cork City 4-1. Derry City beat Shelbourne 1-0, and that proved to be Damien Duff's final game in charge at Shels. And then Waterford were 2-1 winners over Bohs. But Bohs bounced back quite quickly then last night by beating Shamrock Rovers 2-0 in the derby. Dale Rooney with an early goal, and then James Clark with a goal 5 minutes before half-time to double that lead, and Shamrock Rovers never came back into it. And I suppose in the context of the whole weekend, I'm sure Bohs, David, would be delighted, but at the same time, they must be sickened as well, given the context of both games.
Yes, even if they're drawn, they don't seem to be able to draw against Bohs. But look, last night's performance was, I think, everything from a manager's perspective you could look for. You want a derby game, you want energy, you want up pressing the opposition, you want the fans to get behind you. All of those things that any derby game I've played in, your managers, get at them, harry them, chase them down. Force the crowd to get behind, and they did that from the get-go last night. They were just superb. And when I looked at the team, I sort of thought, with Sean Graham gone, at centre half, they sort of played a back three to like Rob Cornwall, okay, centre half. But then you have Flores sort of playing in a back three, who wouldn't be natural to him. He's had to fill in at left back a lot, a natural centre mid. Moran doing the same on the right hand side, natural centre mid. But it just everything worked for them. It was just their energy that they brought to the game. The high press was superb, and it's actually hard to single out players. I know James Clark was man of the match last night, but any of the players could have been selected, particularly in that kind of front five or six. Devoy was excellent, Tierney excellent, Rooney always a threat, always a goal threat for them. And it caused, I don't think Lopez will have a worse first 10 minutes in a game ever, because he was just overall with the pressure. It was obviously a win factor too, but just overall with the pressure, I don't think Rovers almost seemed stunned, which is bizarre to say considering how good they've been this year, to have gone there and almost not have anticipated Bohs to come at them. So huge credit to Bohemians. And as you said, the disappointing from Reynolds' point of view is that they've lost so many games as well when they can perform as well as that. So I think if they can get a couple of reinforcements, particularly in defensive areas, they always seem to be, they've obviously brought Colin Whelan in up front. He hasn't quite hit the ground running, and Clark's taken his opportunity as the front man. But I think defensively, with Graham gone, the fact that they've spent most of the season playing centre mids at fullback would tell me still I thought this at the end of last season, I still think there's a bit of tweaking needed to that squad. Even if it's just, bringing in fullbacks and centre halves to allow those other midfielders move into midfield. but I don't think they're a million miles away. I thought that at the end of last season. I still think a couple of good signings and they can improve and push on. Whether they're close enough to challenge Rovers, I think is very debatable. But certainly from their perspective, from where they were early in the season, from where Alan Reynolds was at half time in the game in Tala a couple of months ago to where he is now, look, it's brilliant from a Bohs perspective. And I think if, as I said, if they can make a couple of additions, I think they can to really have a good second half to the season.
Yeah, and Alan, you were there in Dalymount, so you might just talk us through the press because the first 20 minutes was incredible up until Ed McGinty goes down with an injury, which, well,
Yeah.
I say went down with an injury. I only he or the Bohs or the Shamrock Rovers medical staff will know whether, well, the extent of that. But the first 20 minutes and how they penned in Shamrock Rovers and they couldn't get out. Can you just talk us through that?
Raf, you're too nice. I can tell you now it wasn't an injury. And it's never been an injury. And they're all at it. It's a blight on the game at the moment. I'm not sure how you get round it, but they're all at it. So there's no point in blaming Shamrock Rovers or Ed McGinty. All the teams and the clubs are doing it, and I hate it. But it actually helped Shamrock Rovers, but it only helped them for about 3 minutes because the game restarted after that little break, which they needed badly because they were just being suffocated for that first 20 minutes. Like, it was unbelievable to see how much they struggled to get out of the edge of their own box. Like, they were literally just being penned in. Then McGinty goes down, as you say. For about 3 minutes, they kind of regrouped and they came into the game, but then it was just bang. The next attack the Bohs had, and they were just full steam ahead again right up until halftime. And I commented at halftime that it was the best I've seen of Bohemians. And I go down to Dalymount a fair bit. It was the best I've seen a Bohemians team play in a long, long time. And I don't mean in months, I mean in years. They were absolutely superb from start to finish. Not just in possession, out of possession as well. And obviously you're speaking there about the press, but in possession then they were fantastic. And the formation, to be fair to Alan Reynolds, I know David's saying about the lads that midfielders playing at the back, if you like, but Flores, I think, has kind of more or less played there a lot this season, and I think they kind of view him as a left-sided centre half now, or left full, because he is very good on the ball, so he gets them playing from that area of the pitch. Defensively, it still maybe have a question mark about him, but they might suffer that because he is very good at getting them playing and getting them out. Morahan, who I know from Sligo, I always thought Niall was a better defender than he was a midfielder. And I think Bohemians are realising that now because he played at right full the last few weeks as well, and he played right-sided centre half last night and he was brilliant. But then to play the wing backs, and David would know John Mountney far better than I would, but I'd always see John as a right-sided player, but played left wing back last night. He was fantastic. But then the two kind of stars that they have, as we know, is Dawson Devoy and Ross Tierney. And Dawson, he's one of my favourites in the league. He was brilliant last night, Dawson Devoy. He was outstanding, as was Ross Tierney. And Dale Rooney, who's been a player, probably if you think of Dale when he started at Drogheda, really when he came to prominence, was where people started to take note of him, hence him getting his move to Bohemians. But he's been a brilliant signing, Dale Rooney. He's been outstanding. And not just his quality on the ball with set pieces and his delivery, but out of possession as well, the energy levels and the work rate and the running that he did last night and the pressing, along with James Clark, who was terrific as well. So like David said, if the makings of a really good team, Bohemians, I agree with him that there's still maybe one or two positions, because you look at it, as David said, and you think there's still a couple of lads playing out of position, but he got it right last night, Alan Reynolds, and he's got it right in the last number of weeks. I think that's 6 wins in their last 8. They will be disappointed with Friday because they could be a bit closer. But just in terms of last night's performance and where it leaves them in the table in terms of a title race, I know the game's in hand. I'd prefer to have the points on the board in the games in hand myself personally, but it does give them hope. They're playing Sligo Rovers Friday night. If they play anything like they played last night, they'll beat Sligo Rovers. And who knows after that, then they've given themselves a chance. But just in terms of where Alan Reynolds was, and I was at that game in Tala, 2-0 down, Raf, believe me, he was gone. He was done. And I'd say he probably knew it himself. And to come back and win that, and then to turn it around in the way that he has, and to have that brilliant chant, I'm probably not allowed to say it on air what to sing now to him, but it is very funny what to sing, to be fair. And we're singing it at half time as he was walking off last night as well. And I'm delighted for him as well. I know Alan Reynolds very well. I played with him, and he's a really good fella as well. And I'm delighted because I think he has the makings, as I said, of a really good team, but being a really good manager as well. A lot of people know him as a coach, as he's been different places. But I'm delighted to see things working out for him as well. And they were brilliant. If they can carry on that form between now and the end of the season, and they don't have the distraction, obviously, that Shamrock Rovers will have with Europe as well, and that might help them also. So they're in a really good place. And if they can just maintain that form, they have a really good chance. But they were brilliant last night, Raf.
Yeah, and obviously Rennie he did enjoy the moment with the fans. I think Ross Tierney sort of grabbed him and sort of pushed him in front of him. Then yeah, he just gave the fist bumps as well, which, as you
And,
said,
he, and, and
compared to
he's
the
not
half
one.
time, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sorry, Raf. He's not one for that stuff.
yeah.
He kind of stands at the back, so it was lovely to see because that's probably what's been missing. And the Bohs fans like that, the bit of engagement with the players and the fans as well. And the place was hopping last night. And I always think with that stuff as well, there's a balance to be met. Some of the managers can go over the top with it. He's quite reserved, Rennie, but I do think there's a middle ground with it. And after a result last night, to have your moment with the fans, I've no issue with that, and it's nice to see that because they have taken him back into their into their arms, if you like. He was well and truly gone a few weeks ago, but they've taken him back into their minds, and who knows where it can go. But certainly in terms of them on the pitch, there's the makings of a team there.
Yeah, and they've shown a template, Alan, as well, just how to go at Rovers, like what they did in the second half in the game in Tala, where they used those channels between the wing backs and the centre backs of Rovers.
Mm.
They sort of did the same again this time, where you'd often see Tierney popping in there, or James Clark was pulling wide a fair bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in terms of the press, that was their energy, and that's what kind of won them the game, if you like. That and that initial 20-25 minutes, we often look at a Liverpool or someone steamrolling a team in the first 20-25 minutes. That's what it was like. Like Shamrock Rovers, Jack Byrne at times was dropping onto the 6 yard box just to trying to get them playing, but they couldn't get out. They literally couldn't get out. Now there was a strong breeze in the first half as well, which I think helped them. But you have to use everything to your advantage. In terms of going forward, I'd say that'll be if they can play at those energy levels. Now it probably helped that it was a Dublin derby, but that shouldn't be the case as well, Raf. That you should want to go out if that's as well as they played last night. Go out and play with that intensity every week, and you can see how good they are. But I don't think every team are going to just do that against Shamrock Rovers. I think that's how we'll beat them. They still have serious quality. But it was just, I suppose, last night was Bohemians' night. Stephen Bradley was very magnanimous in defeat. I think anyone that watched the match, it was the only way he could speak about it. But he was honest enough to say that they were well beaten on the night, which they were. And it might not be no harm for them either, because they were having it all their own way over the last number of weeks. And they were almost running away with the thing, which you don't want to see at this early part of the season. Even though we're well down with games, we're still in the middle of the summer. There's still a good bit to go, really. So you would hate to think they would run away with it so early. So I think from the league's point of view as well, Raf, it was good to see that they're fallible and you can get at them and you can go after them, as you say, with different tactics. They matched up last night and played a three at the back, Bohemians, and really got in their faces and went after them. Whether all teams are capable of doing that, I'm not so sure. But certainly, it's, as you say, it's a way to get after them, all right.
Yeah, because Cork City, David, found it quite difficult on the Friday night going up to Tala, particularly in that first half where Shamrock Rovers just sort of blew them away in a sense, even though Cork did have their moments as well. But I wanted to ask you just, striker to striker in terms of Michael Noonan, still, 16 years old. Some of the finishing was brilliant, but also even when he came on against Bohs there last night, his decision making, even for the bit where he plays in Dylan Watts, that is well beyond his years.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, even his interview after the Cork game. He was asked about starting the derby, and he sort of had a very intelligent answer. I thought he said, "Look, the manager will know best, and he's done everything right with me, and I trust him." And I think when you look at Bradley's selection last night, I was kind of surprised a couple of players were left out, but not really Noonan. I thought, particularly in a battle like that, it doesn't surprise me he's gone with Green. Obviously, Gaffney seemed to be unavailable. And when they were playing against such a strong wind as well, it kind of made sense to go with a more experienced guy, probably better with his back to goal. But I thought Noonan brought a lot when he came on in the game in terms of being able to make intelligent runs in behind. He's smart about that, and he kind of has that knack of, obviously, I think his first goal against Cork, it's not the most cleanest of strikes, but he's got that knack of getting a shot off, and especially when a keeper mightn't be set. So he's for such a young lad to be playing at Shamrock Rovers consistently and scoring goals. It all bodes well for him. And as I said, his interview, he looked like a an intelligent young lad, someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to listen, and that bodes very well for him. So look, it's been such a bright start for him personally in terms of the goals in the European game, and it probably went a little bit quiet, but at such a young age, you've so much to learn, and he's talking about learning off Aaron Green, learning off Rory Gaffney. He's certainly in the right place to start to build his career, and I think as an Irish football fan, everybody will be hoping he blossoms there and goes on to greater things.
Yeah, and then Waterford 2, Shelbourne 2 as well. So we've talked a lot about Shels. Obviously, Harry Wood scored a brace in that game, including the first goal and then the equaliser shortly after half time. But maybe focusing more on the Waterford side of things at the moment, David. I mean, coming into this sort of double round of fixtures, there was a little slight sense of worry just after the results they'd had previous to that, but it ended up being a really good weekend. Four points collected from a possible six, and Conan Noonan as well, sort of at the heart of it too.
It was interesting just to listen to John Coleman's interview because I thought he was incredibly honest. As I said earlier in the show, he said he stole a point last night. He obviously was disappointed with how they performed. He said in possession they were really poor, couldn't keep the ball. But all that said, they could still get 2 goals. Not the greatest of defending from Shels, but you got to be there to take advantage. Amond obviously still able to nick a few goals, but yeah, Conan Noonan does brilliantly for the second goal. Gets his shot off. It's spilt by Kearns, and Amond's there to finish. So I think Coleman was quite reflective in terms of how it's been since he's gone in there. He said there's a lot of games where he feels they've been the much better side, and he thinks the potential is there in the team. But I think last night was maybe sort of a bite back to reality, if you like. And he wasn't overly critical of his players because I think he feels the performances have been quite good. So overall, the weekend, if you're picking up 4 points on a double weekend for most teams, that's an excellent return. And other than Derry, I think nobody tops that. So it's a good weekend for them, even if the performances weren't, or the performance last night wasn't exactly where they would have hoped it would be.
Yeah, and then Sligo Rovers 2-1 winners over Galway United. We might talk about the red cards there as well later, Alan. But first, like a few weeks ago, just before we were going into the break, you had mentioned that things were looking kind of bleak there. Suddenly, coupled with Cork City, which we'll talk about later on, things are looking a little bit brighter. It does seem like at least a relegation playoff spot does seem a potentially realistic outcome towards the end of the season.
Yeah, it was looking very grim and very bleak, almost like thunderstorm type weather there for the last few weeks. If you were equating it to kind of a weather forecast, but there's a few just little rays of sunlight coming through, Raf, which is good to see. And yeah, I was in Drogheda Friday night, and they shouldn't have lost that game either, to be fair.
Luke Dennison was brilliant actually on that night.
Yeah, Dennison pulled off 3 great saves, but the chances that Sligo Rovers had the whole second half, they had Drogheda pinned in for the whole second half, and like it wasn't half chances, there was clear cut chances that they missed. Like Ian Kavanagh was guilty of missing one gilt-edged header, like he should have scored. So that would have given him confidence going into the game last night. But even though John Russell would have been very frustrated that they didn't pick up anything, but to go into the Northwest Derby and Galway, obviously coming off the back of a good victory themselves, beating St. Pat's, it would have been a difficult tie. But I thought the play, just from the highlights and even listening to John, he was delighted to get the victory. Now, it was by all accounts, it was a bit of a roller coaster of a game, end to end, up and down, lots going on, chances at both ends, the red cards, as you say, but to come out on the side of victory, he'll be over the moon. That's a big 3 points for him. Lombato, who I think actually, there's a lot of detractors against him, from what I'm kind of hearing, really. But anytime I've seen him, he's done very well for Sligo Rovers. He really has. And for him to get the victory last night, that might give him confidence going forward as well. And even though I was probably one of those you mentioned there, Raf, that a couple of weeks ago people were probably a little bit worried about Waterford, and I actually watched them against Sligo 2 weeks ago, and I know John Coleman thinks they probably should have won the game, but it was a poor performance, and Sligo weren't great either. It wasn't a great game. I felt that if that form continued, they might be one of the ones to maybe get dragged in with Sligo Rovers and Cork. But of course, then the next 2 games they picked up, as you spoke with David, the 4 points out of 6 over the weekend, which has helped massively. But Sligo Rovers will still be kind of focusing on Waterford just in the distance. There's only 9 points, and the one thing with Sligo Rovers, I suppose, that kind of helps them, they do create chances. Now, taking them is another thing, but they have scored 25 goals, and they do create a lot of chances in the games. It's keeping them out at the other end, and that was always the worry I had in terms of the season, Raf. They've conceded 36 goals, which is still a lot, but they do create chances. So even though it's imperative that they stay above Cork City, and that chat we had a couple of weeks ago, I felt it was between the two of them, just maybe for the automatic and the playoff spot. And now they've jumped ahead of Cork. They've gone 4 points clear of them, which is a bit of a jump. That's probably the biggest gap it's been all year, really. But they will still have Waterford and their sights setting them, and they're right to be kind of aiming their sights high rather than looking over their shoulder at what Cork are doing. And that will give them huge confidence. Not just, I suppose, the victory last night, but the performance in Drogheda as well. I know that they got beat, but overall it was a good weekend for Sligo Rovers. They have a tough one now against Bohemians, and we spoke there about how the form that Bohemians are in. They're going into Daleyman Park, and Bohemians' form out of the 10 home games, they've won 7 and lost 3, whereas on the road they've lost 6. So they're very strong at home, and especially in the current climate where they've been very, very good. So it's a tough game for them, but at least they'll be going into it with confidence.
Yeah, and Lomboto, 1 goal as a starter, 3 as a sub. So it seems it's whenever he comes on, he seems to play quite well. Reece Hutchinson as well with the goal saving clearance at the end, I think definitely needs a bit of a mention too. And Sligo have bought centre back Patrick McLean back to the club for July onwards, and also they signed midfielder Seb Quirk as well, as they look to act quickly in the transfer market. Jad Hakiki, though, David, I just wanted to mention very quickly as well, seemed to be quite prominent over the weekend. Obviously, he was at Dundalk previous to that last season.
Yeah, Jad's an interesting one because when he joined Dundalk, obviously he wasn't featuring much at Shelbourne, and Dundalk were obviously struggling last year. And any games I saw live that I was up at, he always sort of stood out to me as somebody who, was technically very good, could create things, could make things happen. And but then after weeks went by, he sort of was dropping in and out of the team. So his form, obviously, for John Daly at the time and the Dock wasn't consistent enough to be playing every week, and that kind of surprised me because I felt he had the ability to do that. And I think Sligo will probably suit him. He's probably a similar player to John Russell as that kind of number 10 link player. I know he's maybe playing a little bit deeper last night, but he's got the ability to score goals, he's got the ability to create goals, and that first goal yesterday was superb slide rule ball by Owen Elding, who's been excellent all year, and Hakiki finishes it really well. And Russell, in his interview, I think he spoke about Jad had missed a chance in the previous game, so he was so happy for him, and you could see he was speaking glowingly about him, that he believes there's a lot of talent there. And I think Jad's playing with the Irish under-21s as well, so he's obviously got the potential to be a very good player. I think what I've seen of him, he definitely has the talent to go on. It's just maybe other elements to a game he needs to strengthen up, but I think under Russell he'll flourish. As I said, he's not too dissimilar to the player that John Russell was. I think he'll be able to guide him well, and I'd expect him to be a big influence on that Sligo side.
Just on him, Raf, he can be frustrating. He has, as David said, he has loads of ability, and I've seen a good few of the games with him with Sligo Rovers. And he has bounced around a couple of clubs, and David mentioned about him being inconsistent and all. I find that with him at Sligo Rovers as well. Now, last night obviously scored, but the game against Drogheda was poor. He gave the ball away for the first goal, never really kind of contributed much after that. Then he missed a great chance in the second half that John alluded to in the interview last night. But it's good to see him getting on the score sheet, because I think he is capable of contributing a hell of a lot more in terms. He takes an awful lot of touches out of the ball as well. He likes to run and dribble with it. And that's all good and well, but there's times where you need to just offload it. And look, he's young, and maybe he can learn that. That he almost seems to think he needs to do it all on his own. Whereas I think if you look at the likes of a Ross Tierney or Dawson Devoy, and they're a bit more mature in their performances and what they do, knowing when to offload the ball and when to maybe go on a little mazy run or a dribble. I think that's stuff he has to learn. As David said, he's in with the 21s. He has huge ability, but he just needs to show a little bit more consistency in his play, because he can do some really good things. And I know the Sligo Rovers fans were mad for him at the start of the season. He really hit the ground running, but there's been a bit of a drop off, and then it's more moments. Whereas I think to get to the level of maybe that where he obviously wants to go with the likes of a Shamrock Rovers or Pats or wherever, or even across the water, it needs to be done on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and then the red card, but more the impact of it, and so or the red cards, sorry, that should be plural. John Mann versus Moses Dyer, which was it was interesting to see. Let's put it that way, Alan. But the impact on Galway United, who had actually come into that game off the back of a really, really well taken win over Pats 3-1. Obviously, the goal everyone was looking at was the David Hurley one for the second one, which was a Joseph Anang error. But this is a bit of a blow for Galway going forward in terms of Moses Dyer's availability.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been one of the players of the season. He's been a revelation. I saw him earlier in the season, a couple of goals. I still think it'll be. I haven't seen a better goal. I know the lad that scored from his own half the other day, but certainly the goal that he scored, the volley in Dalymount earlier on in the season, and even before that, the header that he got was unbelievable. And he played really well in the game, regardless of the goal. So he's been a great find for John Caulfield. And that will be a blow missing them. And if you look at their form, even before the game last night, they had 1-2 and drawn 2, so they had kind of stopped the rot. Whereas before that, they had lost 4 on the bounce, and there was probably a few concerns amongst John and Ollie Horgan, but they certainly stopped the rot in the previous game. So they'll be disappointed to lose last night, especially coming off the back of a good home victory as well against St. Pat's, and of course the blowing out to lose Dyer, because I think it was a straight red, was it, Raf? So he probably missed 3
Yeah.
games now for that. And it looked like the situation had kind of calmed down, because John Mann obviously nailed him on the sideline, and there was the bit of the hoo-ha, but they kind of got a hold of him, and he had calmed down. But then as the two of them, unfortunately enough, they were playing in a similar place, obviously centre half marking the centre forward, and as they're running back into that kind of centre of the pitch, and the two of them come head to head again, and you know yourself, when the red mist descends. I wasn't like that myself. I wouldn't know, Raf. David might. But David was more getting kicked, I suppose, but these kind of tough centre halves. But he's been brilliant, Dyer. Yeah, he's been absolutely outstanding. So that is a blow, especially when it looked like Galway had kind of turned the corner.
Yeah, and Cork City as well. 1-1 draw with Drogheda United. So that is with a late goal by Gennaro Daniels as well, deep into stoppage time, which just gives them that little bit of a glimmer. They're obviously bottom of the table. But first, from the Drogheda point of view, David, Shane Farrell's free kick was brilliant. But the fact that they collected 4 points after all of everything they went through the previous week is obviously a credit to Kevin Doherty, who didn't then kind of had a bit of an argument on the sideline with a lone supporter there as well, which was something he did speak about afterwards.
Yeah, what a couple of weeks for for the club and for him personally. I suppose it's been they obviously immediately went out. They lost again to Shamrock Rovers. I know he felt hard done by that night, that Monday last week, but responded really well. A good win on Friday, and then to go up. You look at, obviously I've not seen the game in person, but you look at the statistics. I think they 25% possession. They score a brilliant free kick. Kevin Doherty's spoken about that they're low on numbers. They've a couple of injuries. It's particularly around centre half. So I think when you're in that mentality, you probably do concede possession. You sort of sit back and you say, right, we're 1-0 up here. We can hold on to our lead, and it would have been a huge weekend had they gone and picked 6 points up. I think Douglas James Taylor has a brilliant chance in the second half to a mistake by Anderson for Cork, and they have a chance to go 2-0 up. Good save from the keeper. You wouldn't blame, James Taylor's a good effort. And then it's sort of Cork trying to just get some life into what's been a bit of a limp. It's probably putting it mildly, couple of months for them. They're without a win in 10 or 11 games. And, for Jaron Nash, it's a good sign that they're at least fighting for every point that they can get. And they finally get a breakthrough in the last minutes. Nice little bit of skill from Shawnee Maguire. Brilliant cross from Fitzpatrick, and Daniels is on the end of it with a good header to put it in. And I think that was the 94th of 6 added minutes. They could again had a winner in the last second with Maguire, and they could have nicked the game. And it'd be hard to say they didn't deserve it, but from Cork's point of view, good that there's still some fight in them, and they'll need to show a lot more of that as towards the end of the season. As Alan said, they're 4 points behind Sligo now, so they've only won twice this season. They have a huge amount of catching up to do. They'll obviously feel they'll need to strengthen now in the window and try and bring in a couple of players in, because, as I said earlier, it's difficult when you're yo-yoing up and down to get a squad together that can compete now in the Premier Division when every team is so strong. Is really difficult. So just trying to survive the first season back would be massive for Cork. They really don't want to be back down in the first division. From Drogheda's perspective, as you spoke about Kevin Doherty's interview, I thought it was a brilliant interview. His teams come down and he'll feel they've battled. They're so close to getting a win. They'll concede last minute. You can imagine the disappointment. Then somebody has a go at you from the sideline. You're still thinking about Europe. Your mind is sort of all over the place, I'd imagine. And it was just, I thought it was a poignant interview. I thought he spoke really well, and his players are giving him everything, and he feels he's giving everything to the club, what they've given to the town. The cup win last year, to get a position in Europe, to then lose it. He's done a magnificent job, and where they are on the table, I think Kevin probably alludes to it himself a lot, that everybody would have expected them to be down fighting with Cork and Sligo down the bottom end. They're sitting third, 35 points, to be that comfortable and to be where they are is just it is an unbelievable first half of the season, and he deserves enormous credit for the job that he's done, both last season and this season. I think since the summer of last year, made some excellent signings, and they've really pushed them on. I think if you look at their form for a year, starting from last summer to now, the number of points they've picked up has been, unbelievable. And if he can strengthen as well this summer as he did last year, who knows? That he'll definitely, and I think he'll be using the European exit as motivation to get back there this year. Let's qualify through the league, and let's earn the right to play in Europe again. We've all taken a kick. Let's do it, and let's do it through the league this year, and try and finish as high as they can.
Yeah, and Cork City have strengthened themselves in terms of signing former Pats defender Rory Feely from Crawley Town, and then Colchester United defender Fikar Kelleher as well. So they're going to be eligible from July the 1st, obviously. So they know what areas they need to address. And as I think you point out, there's been so many headed efforts against Drogheda as well. It was just towards the end that they started getting more clear-cut ones. But the crowd, interestingly, Alan, down in Cork and at Turner's Cross, just 1,815. So there's a weird sort of disconnect there as well. Obviously, the ticket prices, as we talked about on last week's podcast, are sort of looming large there as well.
Yeah, there seems to be a major disconnect, which is sad to see, because the one, I suppose, the highlight of my kind of last 10 or 11 years media career, if you can call it that, Raf, was the brilliant battles with David McMillan's Dundalk and John Caulfield's Cork City. And we almost built the whole coverage on 5 or 6 years of those two going toe to toe, and it used to be amazing to go down to Turner's Cross and see the place hopping and Dundalk coming to town, and vice versa if it was in Oriel Park. And it's sad to see, obviously, that's all gone really, and they had their time in the first division, to see them come back now to the Premier Division. And we need a good thriving Cork City in the Premier Division. As David mentioned about them yo-yoing up and down, like, you don't want that for any club, but certainly for a Cork City, like the potential that's there is absolutely off the charts in terms of the crowds that they can garner from week to week when they're successful and doing well. And I do think there's a couple of factors, as you mentioned, obviously the form, which is so poor. It really has been this season, unfortunately. And there is a jump from the first division to the Premier Division. And of course, Tim obviously was there prior to Jernash. They haven't really got the bounce since he's come in. Now they have made a couple of signs, as you mentioned, Raf, and he'll be hoping they can turn that around. But they've a big mountain to climb. And I think as well, if you listen to his interview, though, I never heard a man more disappointed about picking up a point with a 96-minute equaliser. Like, he was devastated that they didn't win. So it just goes to show, I suppose, maybe how well he felt they played. I also listened to Kevin's interview, and obviously if Dougie had to score, it would have been 2-0. That was probably game over. But by all accounts, Cork did dominate the second half, and I suppose the manager felt, Jernash, that the least they deserved was the point, and he was devastated they didn't get the 3. But that'll be something for him to build on and use the positives of that and get the couple of new players in. And then I suppose the other thing is the ticket prices, like, and if you're asking people to come in and pay €25 for a ticket, and they're languishing kind of 4 points off Sligo Rovers and 9 points off Waterford, and the football's not great, like, what do you expect sometimes from fans as well? They're probably voting with their feet at the moment. So it is disappointing, but I certainly would be of the view that we need a thriving Cork City. Now, I always maintain this as well, that doesn't, just because you're a big club and you have huge potential, that doesn't entitle you to just being in the Premier Division. You have to do it on the pitch, and you have to do it as a club from top to bottom, and everything kind of run properly and earn your place, if you like. But it is a tough one for them at the moment, because I don't think it's going to get any better. And if I know we've said this a couple of times, if it means dropping down to try and build, but they've tried that already, and here they are back, and you're thinking this is going to be the year that they're going to establish themselves. But it's not looking likely at the moment, I have to say, Raf.
No, and then very briefly, let's just talk about Pats and Derry as well. So Liam Boyce with the winner there. We talked a bit about Pats earlier on in the context of their European season, David, and we mentioned sort of the stats and the run at the moment. So they haven't scored a goal in 3 of their last 4, and also they've only picked up a point from a possible 12 in that run as well, and all of that sort of since the break. What is remarkable is probably with all the attacking players they have, that they're not scoring as many goals as you think they should. But at the same time, it's interesting. Chris Forrester's influence has been kind of limited just since he picked up that injury at Waterford, missed a few games, and then he's had a couple of cameos since. I don't know whether there's a correlation there as well, in terms of he is massively important to them, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick. There's probably a lot of factors at play in terms of, like, I look at, obviously every week you're watching one game and you're looking at results then and looking at statistics, and obviously they can be hugely misleading, but nearly every Pats game I look at, they've more possession, they've more shots, and yet they're losing every week. So there's a discord there. Is it that form will suddenly turn? I mean, I listened to Kenny's interview and I listened to Tiernan Lynch, and they both, Kenny was obviously quite happy with his team's performance in terms of they had more possession, they had more chances. Just couldn't seem to score, and he was saying, is that a confidence thing? And you just need to hit the back of the net once or twice, and suddenly, like for example, a player like Aidan Keane at the start of the year just couldn't stop scoring. At the moment, it's not quite going in for him as often as it was. Same from say Mason Media is a great chance, just doesn't happen for him last night. Um, and then on the flip side, there's probably a couple of players where I look at the end of last season that were really in unbelievable form, like the likes of Jake Mulroney was probably the star man. I know from his time in Scotland the potential that he has, and he was shown at the end of last year. Now he's in and out of the team, and you're questioning how is someone that so can be so good and so prominent for Pats when they're flying is now not in the team. And so there's elements of that. You've mentioned Forrester, of course. Other players have come in. I think at centre half they have problems. Like Redmond is a mainstay there, but even you look at the goals against Galway, how that first goal goes in, it's a shambolic. The second one's a shambles. So defensively, they're making, and I say centre half, I'm saying Redmond's the mainstay. I think they do have problems beside him. Other players are out of form, but he himself is also, contributing to errors that are leading to goals. So it's just at both ends of the pitch at this moment in time, it's just not quite happening. I still think they have a squad there that I looked at the start of the season. I thought it would be right up the top of the table. So to try and put your finger on, I've alluded to a few things there, but to try and put your finger on exactly why it's not quite happening. And I think Pats are a side that can turn quickly. We just spoke about going into Europe. Can they find their form and it turns around? The likes of, say, Ramal Parma comes back or something and can be influential for them. He's obviously missed a huge chunk of the season. But other player, Brandon Kavanagh, Keeley, like they were so into. Brandon Kavanagh was unbelievable at the end of last year. I was thinking, where was this lad when he was at Derry? Why wasn't he able to produce those performances there? And it's just tailed off a little bit. So, look, Stephen Kenny, I'm sure, and his backroom team will be working incredibly hard to try and get them back to those levels. I think there was a few sort of boos at the end of last night. They're obviously hugely frustrated in Inchicore. But for Derry, I think we have to highlight Derry's weekend. They've gone to Dublin twice, which isn't always a happy hunting ground for them. They've two 1-0 wins, away to Shelbourne, away to St. Pat's. If they looked at those fixtures, you'd have said, look, we'd probably take 3 points, 2 points, even 4 would be magnificent weekend. To go and take 6 without necessarily being brilliant last night, I don't think. Listening to Tiernan Lynch, it was more a dogged defensive display and a bit of heart, roll your sleeves up and get the job done and get out of there. And for them, I think they've sort of had that before. They've had a run of 3 or 4 wins and you look like this could be a really good Derry team. They slip back again. The weekend's been really good for them, and they could build some momentum. I think they've got the potential there. They have a lot of talented players. I think defensively as well, you'd maybe say they need 1 or 2 reinforcements, but there's the potential there for them to go on a good run, particularly if they can get a really strong home form and then go to Dublin and still pick up results. So for them, it's probably they're the only team that's picked up 6 points over the weekend. So for them, it's been magnificent. They're still a little bit off Shamrock Rovers. I think they'll be disappointed they are so far back, but they'll try and use that as a springboard to push on. And with the games, obviously they've got the additional games to play. If they can still continue to put a run together and get as close as they can to at least European positions, if not towards Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, as David said there, Alan, I mean, this was what I was going to ask you, because as he said, we've seen this before where Derry have picked up, consecutive wins, but then it sort of falls down and they go on a poor run and then they start picking themselves up again. What do they need to do this time to sort of sustain some bit of form, some semblance of form, and sort of avoid the sort of up and down kind of yo-yo form that they sometimes have?
Yeah, I suppose, Raf, that's what all the managers are looking for, is that consistency. We always go back to that word. But unfortunately for Derry, those couple of little blips that they do have cost them dearly, because if you look at the points table and they've 2 games in hand as well, 34 is a decent return. And obviously if they didn't have those couple of blips, they could be closer to Shamrock Rovers with the games in hand as well. So I think, to be fair to Tiernan Lynch, obviously new manager in the door as well, didn't really know the league. So he's probably coming to grips with that as well, to be fair to him. But he inherited a very good team and a very good squad. Like, Derry should have won the league last year. People shouldn't forget that. So it's not like he walked into something that was, took a lot of building and it's going to take time. He's walked into a really, really strong squad with a big budget. I think they're already looking at signings for the summer already. I think the former Airdrie captain looks like he's lined up to come in July as well. So they look like they're going to go and strengthen again. I think the chairman spoke about that last week as well, about the big budget and resources that they have. So Derry City should be up near the top of the table. So hopefully, as you say, the recent run of form, because prior to those three games, the 2 victories in Dublin and the draw against Galway, they lost to Shamrock Rovers and Bohemians. Now, look, people will argue that they're the 2 strongest in the league at the moment. So that can happen. But prior to that, they were 4 unbeaten as well, with 3 wins and a draw. So if they can just cut out those little kind of and they're only little blips, really, to be fair to them. I think Derry can go on and have a really good season. But it's a season that I would expect Derry to have because of what he's walked into, to be honest with you, Raf. It's a really strong squad that they have up there. And I go back to it, they should have won the league. They've arguably one of the best players that's ever played in the league, and Michael Duffy. And you look at the goal that he scored, obviously against Shelbourne on Friday night. An unbelievable goal, and we all know him. David again will know better than me, but one of my favourites, Michael Duffy, a brilliant player. Not just his ability, he looks like a great lad as well, great attitude. So if you've players like that in your squad, you won't go far wrong. So I think Derry, to be fair, they should be looking at it now. Again, without the distraction of Europe, they should be looking at it thinking we can have a really strong end to the season here and really push Shamrock Rovers, because if they were to win those couple of games, no more than Bohemians, I think they're only 5 points behind then. So they have a chance to do really well, and you could be targeting a cup competition as well. So I think he's done okay, Tiernan Lynch, to be fair to him. As I said, becoming in new, inherited a good team and a good squad. You still have to go and manage it. But I think he's done okay with the view that they can really kick on now between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, and obviously they have the Centre of Excellence there, the Derry GA one at Owen Begg as well, which is another boost for them. And then just before we go, obviously there was 2 rounds of action in the first division as well, and it leaves Dundalk top of the table, but only now by 1 point over Cove Ramblers, who are then 8 points clear of Bray Wanderers. And Dundalk drawn 1-1 with Treaty United and then losing 1-0 at Finn Harps, where they dominated parts of the game, but it was a kind of clumsy penalty. It would be remiss of me not to let you go, David, without asking you about Dundalk, given your connections there. But what have you made of their season as a whole and where they're at? Because there was a sense they were running away with it, but now that first division race for the automatic promotion has got very, very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what number of points they were ahead a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, they were looking very good. And look, that's only their first defeat last night. It's when you put that into context, Culduff has come in. He's had to kind of, obviously, all the drama of last season to put a new squad together. And to have been so far ahead, he's a brilliant job. You have to give him a lot of credit for that. Cove as well have had disruption midway through with ownership issues, and they've sort of steadied the ship as well and come strong in the last couple of weeks. I think they've 4 wins in 5, so they've really sort of put it up to Dundalk, I suppose. And it's without Dundalk haven't run away with a lot of games. They're not winning games sort of 4 or 5-0. They've eked out results and continued to keep up the top of the table. Now they're under serious pressure. Cove 1 point behind. So, as you said, I think a few weeks ago people thought it's all too easy for them, and it's just there wouldn't be a title race. It certainly looks like there's a title race on now, and obviously I'm biased. I would love to see Dundalk back in the top flight, but it'll be an interesting end of the season to see how those two get on. And Dundalk need to react. As I said, it's their first defeat now of the season. So how do you react to that as players? They haven't the last 3, 2 draws and a loss. So Culduff will have to use that as motivation to try to get them back on track and stay ahead of Cove.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. But that's it for this week. Next week, the podcast will be back in its regular Monday slot, and Richie Tow will be back with us the week after that. We'll be previewing Women's Euro 2025 in full, and of course, all of the games will be live to watch or stream on RTÉ across July. We'll also be reflecting on Ireland's 2 games in the USA, and also the upcoming round of LOI games across our 3 divisions, and any other news that happens between now and then, because as we've seen over the last week, you can never predict what type of news breaks in between episodes. But thanks to you, Alan and David, and we'll chat soon.
Pleasure, Raf.